Well, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. It says a lot about all of you as parents and concerned citizens that you love and care for your families and your communities. So I applaud you for that. I also know we've got some members of the school districts here tonight, and I want to thank you for being here as well. It's important for you working for the school district to know some of the things that are going on here, the stuff that maybe you haven't been told. So we're glad that you're here. Thank you so much for being here. Like Pastor Ted said, we've got a lot of great speakers tonight, and it's my privilege to introduce up the first one. But before I do that, I want to let you know we are going to have a time of Q&A at the end. And how that's going to work is you can go ahead and text in your questions. So there's going to be a slide that goes up on the screen. And as you have questions, just send them in. The reason we're doing it that way is we won't get time tonight to get to everybody's questions. So start sending in your questions. We'll get to as many as we can tonight. And whatever we don't get to, we'll make sure we're able to answer those at a later time. So that's how you do it. Feel free all throughout the night to make sure. We'll continually kind of put that up so you can see it. But feel free to send in your questions. And like I said, we'll get to as many as we can. But tonight, to start things off, what we want to do is talk about the public education system and parental rights. And we've invited Pastor Mark Schneider to come out for this. Pastor Mark Schneider is the founder of the Protect Our Kids project within Church United. Mark Schneider is an engineer lawyer who has served as a corporate counsel and in executive positions at several large technology companies before going into private practice. In response to Prop 8, which fought to preserve traditional marriage in California, Mark established the Salt and Light Ministry at Calvary Chapel East Anaheim, where he still serves. Mark has published a law review and other articles that touch on the intersection of law, theology, and culture, including a book entitled A Manual for Christian Citizenship. A native Californian, Mark he is married with his two grown children. Would you guys please welcome up Pastor Mark Schneider?
Does that help? Oh, perfect. Great. Well, Pastor Tim, thank you very much. And Pastor Leavenworth, I want to thank you also for hosting us tonight. And for all of you who decided to give up a Tuesday evening, we are deeply grateful that you decided to spend the time to learn something about AB 329. You're probably going to hear a lot more than you want to about this bill. But it's needful that you hear the facts, and we hope to provide those to you. But before we dive into it, we'd like to give you some context. One thing you're going to hear about tonight is something called a framework. A framework is sort of a guide of operating principles that give guidance to the curriculum that's going to be coming out as a result of the new law. But there is another framework that I'd like to call our attention to as we start tonight. And this is a framework that goes back to 1776. And it's one you may remember. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. Did you catch that? That's the purpose of government, to secure our unalienable rights. What is an unalienable right? Well, it's a right that cannot be transferred because it's not given to us by men. It's a right that's given to us by God. It's a right we hold by virtue of being part of humanity, human beings. Here's the question for us this evening. Is your rights as parents to raise your kids and imbue them with the values that you hold dear an unalienable right? Not everybody thinks so.
The state needs to be the ultimate guarantor of a child's well-being. There's just no alternative to that. The reason parent-child relationships exist is because the state confers legal parenthood on people through its paternity and maternity laws. It's the state that is empowering parents to do anything with children, to take them home, to have custody, and to make any kind of decisions about that.
Did you catch that? It's the state that empowers you to parent your children, that gives you the right to have custody. And unfortunately, that is more and more a prevailing opinion throughout the United States, and particularly here in California. I'm going to show you a rather busy chart, but what it really says, it shows the regression of parental rights over the course of American history. And this regression of parental rights mirrors the exchange of Western civilization for a host of isms: humanism, secularism, postmodernism. You take your pick. But Western civilization, which is the merging of the transcendental truths that came from Jerusalem with the logical reasoning that came from Athens, is what's known as Western civilization. And that is what we are seeing being eroded year after year. All early education in America taught this going back to the early 1600s. And the primary motive of education was character development, to establish virtue in the citizens that are growing up and are going to take the reins of society. All the higher centers of learning in the United States understood this truth and practiced it, including our original Ivy League colleges. In fact, if you look at their college crests, Harvard's is Veritas, which is Latin for truth. Yale's is Lux et Veritas, light and truth, a direct reference to Psalm 43:3. Columbia's, in lumine tu vidimus lumen, in thy light we shall see light, from Psalm 36:9. Princeton's, de sub numine viget, under God she flourishes. And America did flourish. Despite her many warts, and she's had many, we defeated slavery. We won 2 world wars. And we provided our citizens with greater prosperity, opportunity, and liberty than any nation on earth before or since. What changed? Well, there are many factors that are responsible for changing the climate of education in the United States. But if you go back and look at history, there were 2 men in particular that had an extraordinary influence. One of these is the Unitarian Horace Mann. Horace Mann was a Secretary of Education in the state of Massachusetts, and he was the first one that came up with the idea of public education. And he had 2 goals for it. Number 1, all education was to be uniform. Everybody was going to learn the same thing. But more importantly, it was to be brought under government control. And he set the stage for the second man, John Dewey, who is known as the father of progressive education. John Dewey was a signer of the first Humanist Manifesto, and he utterly rejected the ethical monotheism that was the part and parcel, the undergirding of all Western civilization. As for education itself, Dewey said, it must be regulated to bring about 2 things: social consciousness and social reconstruction. Does that sound familiar? This is way back in the 1800s. As for the founder's self-evident truths and unalienable rights, these are false biases that schools needed to be protected from. And the schools have been protected from them increasingly. Everson versus Board of Massachusetts, a famous case in 1947. Took a letter that Thomas Jefferson had written to a group of Danbury Baptists, completely out of context. Jefferson was writing them to assure them that the new federal government under the Constitution would secure their rights of conscience. But this court took that statement out of context and said matters of faith and state must never again intersect, because there is a wall of separation between the two. As for prayer and Bible reading, well, a little over a decade later, and despite a 300 history to the contrary, school prayer was ruled unconstitutional. In fact, in that case, there was not one supporting case that was cited by Justice Black in his opinion to support this new decision. So much for stare decisis. 1 year later, it was decided that no Bible reading in schools we could have. That was now illegal. such that by the 1970s, the authority for education was no longer parents, but the state increasingly alienated toward parents. And the primary purpose of education, whether it was overtly stated or not, became to inculcate students with a secular worldview, and only secondarily to teach proficiency in reading, writing, and arithmetic. Well, it didn't take long to start seeing the results of this new mindset. In 1983, a famous report came out entitled "A Nation at Risk," which concluded that there was a rising tide of mediocrity that threatens our very future as a nation and as a people. The 3 R's floundered, but Dewey's goals were met beyond any imagining that he could have ever had. Because by 1980, Professor Alan Bloom, a famous professor at the University of Chicago, in his also famous book, The Closing of the American Mind, could announce that there is one thing a professor can be absolutely certain of. Almost every student entering the university believes, or says he believes, that truth is relative. Ladies and gentlemen, that was 39 years ago. What about today? In terms of dollars per student spent, we outspend virtually every nation on earth in public education. But what are we getting for our money? Well, we're ranked consistently in the bottom or the middle rungs. Here's one study from Pew Research. California ranks even lower still, 44 out of 50 in terms of K through 12 education, according to US News and World Report. In parallel with the declining educational standards was the decline of parental rights. In 1944, Prince v. Massachusetts was decided, which says that now the government will decide what's in the best interest of children. In 2005, a famous case out of the Ninth Circuit, Fields versus Palmdale School District, said that basically parents have no constitutional right to prevent a public school from providing students with whatever information it wishes, sexual or otherwise, when the school determines that it's appropriate to do so. But well before then, California had already gotten on board what we know as the LGBT gender identity train. Here is just a partial list of laws starting under Gray Davis that were passed since 1999. A few of the notable ones. In 2004, the Education Code was changed to redefine gender as one's perceived sex, whether or not that sex agreed with one's actual sex. In 2011, SB 48 was passed, which said that children must be taught now to admire people based purely on their sexual proclivities, particularly when they're non-traditional. In 2013, AB 1266 was passed that required children to open the most personal enclaves of privacy and probity to other children of the same sex. Which brings us to tonight's topic, AB 329. And as you hear the presentations following, just keep what you've heard in mind. And also know that we've discovered no new scientific, moral, or psychological truths to account for the situation that we find ourselves in today, which you're going to hear about shortly. Americans have simply capitulated to those seeking to transform our society into something both unrecognizable and dangerous. Thank you.
There we go. All right. So AB 329, how many of you have heard of it? Okay, good. Well, that's also known as the California Healthy Youth Act, and the person we've asked to come up and speak about that today is no stranger to this. He's done a lot of research. He's very well versed in it. His name is Pastor George Rosca, and he is the 8th of, listen to this, 12 children. God bless his parents. He was born in Romania under the communist regime of Nicolae Ceausescu. His family emigrated here to the United States legally in his childhood. He grew up in Southern California, going from first grade through his master's degree. He is married with 4 children and pastors New Hope Church in Placentia, California. He holds a bachelor's and a master's degree and is also registered as a civil engineer in the state of California, practicing for over 12 years on large transportation infrastructure projects. He is passionate about protecting the freedoms granted in the Constitution that are aligned with the values of the Founding Fathers for future generations. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome up Pastor George Roska. Hey.
I think that round of applause was for my parents, not for me. Well, Mark Schneider gave you a context of how we got here as America. I'd like to give you the context of what the other side thinks and what they mean when they use a lot of these words. The very first context that I'd like to give you is on a couple of these organizations. You'll see their names coming up over and over and over. Let me just show you what they tweet about, just so we can get into their brains. This is a post by Seekus, if we could leave it up. All right. Seekus put up a tweet back in January of this year, and they said, "Sex education is a vehicle for social change, full stop. What do you think the world would look like if everyone received comprehensive sexuality education?" Over on the right, "We need to prioritize educating young people about all of these concepts early on. Sex education is a golden opportunity to teach youth about dismantling systems of power and oppression that perpetuate white supremacy, homophobia, transphobia, and more." Sex education, really? I thought you learned that in government or something else. This is a 2-page PDF that came out from Planned Parenthood and Seekus together. By the way, Seekus stands for the Sexuality Information and Education Council of the United States, as if we need one of those. And here's what they said: if you care about abortion rights, then you should care about sex education. And third tweet, sex ed is about abolishing heteronormativity. And this is from GELSON, the Gay, Lesbian, Straight Education Network. And this is way back in 2016. Why heteronormativity is a bad thing? Question mark. Who knows what heteronormativity means? I went through my master's degree and I never heard that word once. It's about time we kicked heteronormativity to the curb. Never heard of the term before? It's the idea that binary gender identity and heterosexual orientation, meaning there are only 2 sexual orientations and genders, are the norm. And they were quoting an article from Teen Vogue. And guess what is the target audience for them? 13 to 17-year-old girls. So when we talk about AB 329, AB 329 mandates this new term. It doesn't mandate sex ed. That's long gone. It mandates comprehensive sexuality education. So when you hear this new term come up, think about those tweets. That's what these people are after, and that's what they're looking for. Because as you're gonna see, I'll be posting a lot of the legalese, straight up verbatim, the law, what it says. And you're gonna say, "George, I don't see any of that in there." And that's true, because it's a matter of just redefining the terms. And that's really what they're after. All of these organizations have been fighting to redefine what comprehensive means, what sexuality means, and what education. I just say it's comprehensive sexuality indoctrination. So let's focus on one of the words, sexuality. Back in 2006, the World Health Organization defined this for us, and they said sexuality is a central aspect of being human throughout life, and it encompasses sex, gender identities and roles, sexual orientation, eroticism, pleasure, intimacy, reproduction, that's code word for abortion, thoughts, fantasies, desires, beliefs, attitude, values, behaviors. When you hear we're going to teach comprehensive sexuality education, this is what definition they're going by. Planned Parenthood also defines CSE to encompass gender, pleasure, diversity in relationships, HIV, violence, and sexual rights. This is a declaration, a manifesto that they published in May of 2006. Planned Parenthood has an international umbrella that they operate under called the International Planned Parenthood Federation. In May of 2006, they published this framework on comprehensive sexuality education. Where was I when all of this happened, when they were all plotting on how they're going to change everything? The last item under there, under comprehensive sexuality education, is sexual rights. And this is key because 2 years later, still Planned Parenthood published a sexual rights declaration in May of 2008. And they are creating this linkage between sexual rights is equatable to human rights, equatable to civil rights. Why is this important? Because if you as a parent deny your child comprehensive sexuality education, you are in fact denying them their sexual right, which is equatable to a human right, which is equatable to a civil right, which it's an atrocity. How can you let that happen? I'm sorry for being a little bit more animated. They're trying to change the law without changing the law. Because what do we have in the United States of America? In 1964, we have the Civil Rights Act. And so what they get to do is they get to change the meaning of that entire law without having to change the law. Now, civil rights is equatable to sexual right. So where does this come from? Where did they think about all of this? How did they plot it out? Well, there is an organization called the United Nations, and they get a lot of money from the United States, from our taxpayer dollars, and they have a lot of time to spend with that money. And one of the sub-departments, if I may call, of the United Nations is UNESCO, United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. And last year in September, they published the International Technical Guidance on Sexuality Education. International, as if we need one of those. My parents had 12 kids without any of this. And we grew up in a town of 300 people in Romania. They were just fine. But I want you to listen to the organization that is pushing this internationally, what conclusion they draw on page 28 of 142. It is difficult to draw strong conclusions about the impact of CSE on biological outcomes such as STI or HIV rates, as there are still relatively few high-quality trials available, particularly those that take a longitudinal approach. All right, let's decipher that. It is difficult to draw strong conclusions in September of 2018. And yet in California, the conclusion was drawn in September of 2015 that we need to teach CSE and mandate it starting January of 2016. And yet, the very organization that works hand in hand with Planned Parenthood to make this happen internationally can't come up with evidence saying that it's successful. Now, the other thing they say here is, what are the outcomes they're looking for? Because sex ed is all about lowering pregnancies, unwanted pregnancies, and lowering STDs and HIV rates, right? They're saying we can't find a brink of evidence in a longitudinal approach, meaning something that lasts for more than 12 months. So then what they do is then they have these fancy organizations within the United States, such as Advocates for Youth, Answer, and SIECUS, and they come and they form all of these nonprofit organizations. And they try to trick you because they call their standards, the national sexuality education standards. But this has nothing to do with the federal government. It has nothing to do with the Federal Department of Education. They just give it these terms to make it sound like, for us parents, as we're reading through this, oh man, I really can't fight against this. A bunch of people have probably figured out government, is mandating it. No, they like just to use and to hide behind these terms. So the other thing they try to do is they try to bring credible government organizations. And one of them was the CDC, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. And one of the authors of the National Sexuality Education Standards was brought on board by the CDC to create a sexual health education framework from the CDC, because now they can go from district to district, from state to state, and say, well, the CDC says this, and they're a credible organization. And in fact, if you read, and I'll show you in AB 329, under Article 2, they say comprehensive sexuality education must be medically accurate. And they reference 4 credible organizations that can dictate what is medically accurate. One of them is the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. So they infiltrate all of these areas so that way then they can point back to them and say, it's not us. They agree with us. So let's look at the California Healthy Youth Act. And now that you understand what all of these terminology means when I start reading it, and I have highlighted and bolded them so you can see, all of these keywords. Well, back in 2015, Assemblymember Shirley Weber was the person in the assembly who pushed this through. She was supported by these organizations: California Teachers Association, that's the teachers union; California School Board Association; California Parent Teacher Association; Planned Parenthood, ACLU, Latinas for Reproductive Justice, Equality California, and there's a lot more. But I want you to see that, because basically the first few up there are the organizations and the unions that we think are protecting our children. We think they're protecting our teachers, but they are not. They are against children. They are against teachers. They are against parents. So whenever we get a state law that's passed, then it goes from the legislature to the State Department of Education. And from the State Department of Education, they have what is called the Instructional Quality Commission, and they deal with the curriculum framework. And so it started back in 2016, right after the law was passed, and the State Department of Education for the last 3 years went through a very arduous process to bring out the health framework. And I'm sure some of you probably have already seen a lot of the examples that were given on Facebook group Informed Parents of California. But here's just a timeline of the process. There were 2 60-day review periods in there, one last year and one at the end of last year, beginning of this year. We submitted the first time around in June of 2018 over 600 comments out of the 789 that they received. And then in January this year, we submitted over 2,000 comments to the CDE, and they did not address any one of our comments. They barely, at last week's rally, where they still approved the framework, removed a couple books. And by removing, they're saying, well, we're not banning them. We're not saying those books are bad. And Stephanie will come up here and will show you how bad and filthy they are. But they just wanted to stay away from that. So let me just give you a couple of examples out of the framework. The framework was structured by age group, age category. In over 700 pages that I've read through on the framework, abstinence is only mentioned twice, because abstinence goes against the ideology of comprehensive sexuality education. Under the TK through 3rd grade chapter, they say, gender does not always match the sexual and reproductive organs described. You're talking about human reproductive organs to little children, 4, 5, 6, 7-year-olds. and you're telling them this as if it's a fact when gender ideology is a myth. 4th through 6th grade, they say to challenge binary concepts about gender. Now, my son is in 4th grade, and I thought to myself, if his teacher got up in front of the class and she would start lecturing on this, and he would say, well, you know what? My dad taught me otherwise. He's good at doing that. I've taught him how to pop up his hand and do that. The teachers are being told to challenge. The only adult figure in the room is being told to challenge a 10-year-old, an 11-year-old, a 12-year-old. That is sickening. 7th through 8th grade, they say example for spiritual abuse includes using religion to justify abuse, insisting on rigid gender roles. Since when has the state of California become the Church of California, telling us what spiritual abuse means? 9th through 12th grade, they say the usage of LGBTQ plus throughout this document is intended to represent an inclusive and ever-changing spectrum. You know what that means? It means gender is infinite. It's on an infinite spectrum. You could be whatever you want to be. Crazy. So now from that framework, what ends up happening is the big curriculum developers and providers, they're supposed to be using that to know how to develop the next revision of the textbook. And there is an approval process that they have to go through that goes through a quasi-government entity. It's called ASHWAG, the Adolescent Sexual Health Working Group. The two main entities from the public side are the State Board of Education along with the State Public Health Department. And then on the right side of the screen, you'll see the non-government organizations. These are NGOs, and I highlighted about 3 because the names of these NGOs doesn't come across really well because they're actually curriculum developers. They sit on the committee that approves curriculum. What a conflict of interest. They submit it to themselves, and they always use these, fancy, nice, and healthy names that never jives with the name of the curriculum they use. So, for example, have you guys all heard about Teen Talk? Well, the name of their organization is called Health Connected. You would never be able to correlate those two. Well, anyway, on their website, they show that they have approved 5 curricula for middle school and 6 for high school, each one worse than the other. But I want to give you one example. So usually government organizations, for those of you that deal with government, they move really fast. I mean, they move really fast. All right. So check this out. Follow me. In October of 2015, AB 329 was passed, and it said in January of 2016, it's going to be enacted. It took the CDE 3.5 years to go through their process. Yet, in 2016, this Adolescent Sexual Health Working Group, they already received and reviewed all of those 5 and 6 curriculum that I mentioned, and they approved them. How is that possible? You know why? Because Planned Parenthood, ACLU, and all of these other entities that supported the law, they had already all of this stuff written and just submitted it as soon as the law passed. Collusion, right? Oh, I shouldn't use that word, collusion. Oops. And just to show you that, Positive Prevention Plus, one of the curriculum, down at the bottom in one of their lessons, they cite a source, and in the source they say California Health Framework 2018. It wasn't finalized in 2018. Usually when something's not finalized, you have a draft before it. But they already thought they knew what was going to happen. So let me take you now through the 5 articles of AB 329. The very first Article code 51930 through all the way through 51939 talks about, well, what is our intention? Well, to provide pupils sexually transmitted infections and from unintended pregnancy, gender, sexual orientation, promote understanding of sexuality. I'm highlighting some of these words just so you can see them. To ensure pupils receive integrated, comprehensive, unbiased. That means we don't want abstinence in there. Next one here, 51932. In part B, it says this chapter does not apply to instruction that's related to gender, gender identity, gender expression, sexual orientation. And I'm sure we're going to get asked this question during Q&A. Can we opt out? You can opt out of anything that discusses human sexual reproductive organs, but you cannot opt out of anything that's gender, gender identity, sexual orientation inclusive. 51933 says the instruction and materials shall be age appropriate, shall be medically accurate. Well, according to whose medical accuracy, right? A CDC and all of those other organizations. But here's one thing that we need to use in our favor. 51933D4 says instruction and materials shall not reflect or promote bias against any person on the basis of any category protected by Ed Code 220. They don't spell out the Ed Code 220, so you have to go and research what that says. Well, in there, it's just a long list of protected classes in the state of California, and one of them includes religion. But if you read through all the curriculum, everything is very anti-religion. And then the last, section 5 says, instruction and materials shall affirmatively recognize. And this is a killer, because when you want to talk about the negatives of HIV, AIDS, STIs, STDs on a particular group of people, well, you can't do that, even though it's a fact, even though it's truth, even though you want to help them, and you're not going to tell them lies, and then they go off and do something, and then they get infected for the rest of their life. The state of California says that's not important. Explore the harms of negative gender stereotypes. Ooh, those religious people, you know, they are stereotypical and just fear-mongering. 51934, this is an interesting one because it cites an Ed code called confidential medical services. This is where they're going to teach your children how to leave school without parental notification and get any kind of reproductive services they want. And lastly, I'll jump out to 51938, and this is a change in the law because before AB 329, you had what was called an opt-in, meaning if the school wanted to teach your children something, they'd have to write a letter home and you'd have to sign that form. If they didn't receive the letter, your child was excluded. Now it's an opt-out. So if you didn't receive a form or got a form, forgot to sign it, didn't sign it, or your kid just never gave it to the teacher, you're automatically included. And so this opt-in versus opt-out is crazy. It's nuts. But one of the things that they did write in the law is that it says they have to notify parents 14 days in advance. Parents, please use this part of the law. It's very important. We've had parents who've received 5-day notifications and no notification. And so we have law firms here that are ready to support you and write letters to your school districts and stop that. Legally, we can stop the instruction from happening if you never received an opt-out. So with that, I want you to think about comprehensive sexuality education now in light of what you just learned. And as you're going to be seeing all of this roll out into the curriculum, it'll finally make sense. Thank you very much.
That's good. Thank you. All right. All right, so in my opinion, our next speaker's got the hardest job of the night, and that is to talk to you all about what is in the curriculums, what is in some of these books. And so I'm going to invite up in just a moment here a woman named Stephanie Yates. Stephanie Yates is a wife and mother of 3 children. one in the public school system, and and she is the founder of Informed Parents of California. How many of you are on that group? If you're not on that group, you're going to want to get on that group because it'll keep you informed. It began in April of 2018 as a simple Facebook user group, and it has grown to over 23,000 parents across the state. Amazing. Amazing. Stephanie has become a subject expert on the content of the state's California Healthy Youth Act approved curriculum and has shared it with thousands of concerned parents across the state. She equips parents to engage at local school boards to fight for parental rights and for the protection of our kids. Please help me welcome up Stephanie Yates. All right.
Can you hear me? There we go. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for coming out on a Tuesday night. You're definitely going to be thankful in some aspects, but what I'm going to tell you, I'm just going to give you a warning up front. It is, the following presentation contains sexually graphic material. It is not intended for children. That's why there's child care provided. But we feel obligated to inform the public because this is what our children, as young as kindergarten, even TK, can possibly get all the way through 12th grade. That was new stats that I heard, 23,000. It's a couple days ago, I think it was like 20 or 21,000, so we're growing a lot. So I encourage everybody after the conference, get on Facebook, get on Informed Parents of California, join it, and then add all your friends and your family and everybody, because everybody needs to know what's going on, and you'll see why. Okay. Oh, sorry. Let's see. I'm missing something here. Oh. Okay. So one of the things I do want to tell you is, before I get on this slide, is what I am going to say, the fear is going to start creeping in because people get fearful of, like, what do we do? Because it's so dark and it's too much to handle, and we really don't want to believe this is happening to our kids. But that's where we need to stand on our faith and on God's word and really stand on him, because he's our rock. And this is a spiritual battle. And the way the spiritual battle is happening in our schools today is the way I'm going to show you. Our kids are under attack. Okay, so comprehensive sexual education is taught to children with no parental consent is required. And it, hold on one second. Sorry, I apologize. No parental consent is required. So one of the things that you may get home in the mail or when your kid comes home is a notice, kind of like this one. This one is from a school in Orange County, and I'm sure a lot of you may be getting them here in Riverside County as well. This is a form, and it says, this letter is to inform you that the Family Life Sex Education Unit will begin on X date, and parent notification is required for this program. Videos will be shown to cover human anatomy, human reproduction, and sexually transmitted diseases, including HIV, AIDS. And then it says at the bottom, please check the following box. Sign the bottom of the paper, and you have your student return this to the class. The box says, I understand that my child will be starting this unit of human reproductive and sexually transmitted disease, including HIV and AIDS. Is this a permission slip, or is it an FYI? Right? So what that does not tell you is that they're going to normalize anal and oral sex to our children. What it doesn't tell you is that it's going to have an obsessive focus on sexual pleasure. What it doesn't tell you is that it's going to promote and encourages exploration and experimentation of gender identity and sexual orientation. You also hear the reference, the terminology SOGI. What it does not tell you is that it teaches children how to give and receive consent. The law, AB 329, uses the terminology negotiation skills. If we put that into context, that's negotiation skills for child sex. That's illegal. Why would they want to teach our children how to give and receive consent as young as TK. They're saying that it's because they want to protect them from unwanted attention of predators, that unwanted stuff. That's the difference between consent and not allowing somebody to touch you, because at no age younger than 18, anybody is supposed to touch you. That's where we teach our children, no, these areas, nobody touches you. Not that you negotiate whether somebody touches you or not whether you give them consent or not, because they're not allowed to. So why are they doing this? Possibly because if you teach children as young as TK how to give and receive consent, then you can lower the consent laws or you can eliminate them altogether. In Mexico, they lowered them to 12 years old. In France, they eliminated them. Okay? So they want to teach our children how to give and receive consent. They're not telling you that in that notice. And then they don't tell you in that notice that they're exposing your children to visual and written pornography. So that notice, which is not an opt-in or opt-out or a permission slip, is not full disclosure. There's no transparency there. Okay, there we go. So I'm going to show you what it looks like in the framework and the curriculum, TK through 12th grade. So this is chapter 1. Everything in chapter 1 in the framework, this is the California Healthy Framework, refers to TK through 12th grade. The goal of the California Department of Ed is for our children to explore and discover their gender identity and sexuality starting in traditional kindergarten on all the way through and into and beyond their high school years. The way they plan on doing this is by introducing comprehensive sexual education in TK through 12th grade. In elementary, they will introduce gender identity and sexual orientation. By the time they get into 5th grade, they start introducing sexual activity and head full force into junior high and high school. This is the genderbread person. I remember seeing this a couple years ago thinking, no way, that's insane. And guess what? It's in our schools. It's in the curriculums. I believe you guys have Positive Prevention Plus here in Riverside County. A lot of the Riverside County have Positive Prevention Plus. Your kids are going to get this.
Let's unpack this whole gender conversation. You use a device or a character called the genderbread man.
Person.
Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry. The genderbread person.
It's okay. I found it really helpful to think about gender in a few different distinct categories. Gender identity, how you define your gender and how you see yourself. Gender expression, the different ways that we present or perform gender through our actions, our dress, and our demeanor. And biological sex or anatomical sex, the physical characteristics that make up our body that in many people's minds equal gender, but don't.
So gender expression is the way you present yourself to the world. So you could be talking about the way you dress.
Yeah.
The way you comb your hair.
Or don't.
Or use product.
Yeah.
So everything kind of as it relates to the outside world,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, that's a perfect way of thinking about it. So even just, okay, so this is funny. The way that I'm sitting right now is a very feminine expression of sitting, because like how we sit is gendered, right?
And meanwhile, I'm kind of man-spreading.
Yeah, you're man-spreading. You're not even giving me enough room to properly man-spread over here. This is the man cross, the masculine way of crossing a leg. This is just uncomfortable for me. Feels like so much.
It feels good to me.
Yeah?
Yeah, it's like yoga. Okay, now let's do the girl.
Okay.
So gender is different than sexual orientation.
Yeah.
But a lot of people get them confused.
Yeah. Gender is who you go to bed as. Sexual orientation is who you go to bed with. So if you haven't heard that one's important.
So let's talk about penises and vaginas, shall we?
Yeah, we might as well.
Let's just go right there.
If you haven't already talked about penises and vaginas, we need to talk about penises and vaginas, because that's what everybody always thinks. Like immediately, as soon as you say gender, anybody who's walking by right now who's hearing us say the word gender, the first thing that's popping into their mind is external genitalia. They're thinking about penises and vaginas.
So, for the purpose of our discussion, the bottom line is your external genitalia does not dictate your gender.
Yeah.
Wait a second. Can you rewind that?
The bottom line is your external genitalia does not dictate your gender.
Yeah, I mean, that I couldn't have said it better.
So that's confusing. I was going to say something and I can't even remember because he said something about who you go to bed with and what you are, but that's what they're teaching our kids as in elementary school. The genderbird person, right? Person, man. And he is the one that created it, the gentleman that you saw. Okay, so now I'm going to go into the framework TK through 12th grade, TK through 3rd grade. That is 4 to 8-year-olds, and they're recommending many different books. One of the books that they're recommending is Who Are You? A Kid's Guide to Gender Identity. And I'm going to be showing you multiple books, but this is the first one. And it says, some people say there are only 2 genders, but there are really many genders. There are just a few words people use: transgender, genderqueer, non-binary, gender fluid, transgender, gender neutral, age gender, any age, new choice gender, bigender, third gender, two-spirit. On the top it says, who am I? And it's these are kids' books. Kindergarten. Who am I? Am I a boy? Am I a girl? Am I neither? Am I both? Or am I just me? On this page of the same book, it says babies can't talk, so grown-ups make a guess by looking at their bodies. But they're really starting to confuse our little ones. This is confusing our little kids. They're coming home wondering what they are. There's in Rockland, California, they had a whole transgender reveal, and I'm hearing stories years later that the kids are still, that were exposed to that, are still have moments where they don't want to touch their siblings' clothes because they think they're going to turn into the opposite sex. It's really serious what's going on. This is another book out of chapter 3. It's called My Princess Boy. And I'll read you one page from it. I love my princess boy. When we go shopping, he is the happiest when looking at girls' clothes. But when he says he wants to buy a pink bag or a sparkly dress, people stare at him. And when he buys girls' things, they laugh at him and they laugh at me. And it hurts both of us. Remember, this is being taught to 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. They're mentally confusing our children and emotionally manipulating them. Our children have big hearts, and do you think they want to hurt anybody's feelings? No. This is another book, 4 through 8-year-olds. It's Not the Stork in Changing You. On this page, they're showing and labeling all the different body parts. Now, take in mind, this is a mixed group. You may or may not be sitting by your spouse. You may be sitting by a complete stranger. That you're maybe a female sitting by a male that's a complete stranger, and vice versa. And this is probably very uncomfortable. And that's how they have our kids. It has to be mixed, because it will cause anxiety, fear, confusion, distrust if they separate boys and girls when doing sex ed. So everything that you're seeing, they're going to be seeing mixed company. So they're labeling the different body parts, including the vulva and the penis and the scrotum. They are desensitizing our children, and take in mind, again, they're mixed. This page is more detailed of the body and introduces an erect penis and discusses what an erection is, along with showing circumcised and uncircumcised penises. For the little girls, she is squatting down with her legs open so they can see her vagina, and it shows and labels the clitoris, vulva, vagina, along with the anus. This is child pornography. This is Changing You, a guide to body changes and sexuality for elementary school children. Here they show how their hair grows on different body parts, including the vagina and around the penis. They expose our children to these body parts, including bare breasts. Remember, boys and girls are in the classroom together, sitting next to each other. They show the female and male naked from child, teen, to adult and discuss that when they are ready to be sexual with someone and have babies. Here, they show and describe how a woman and man lay close together and the man puts his erect penis inside her vagina. That's sexual intercourse. We have to black it out because it's so graphic, but they're not blacking it out to show our children. This is a book in chapter 4 of the framework, which covers 4th through 6th graders. This book, along with the boy book, is for 5th graders. There are so many penises in this girl book. Lots of penises, lots of vaginas, in every form, in every way, in every direction, erect, not erect. The boy has the same thing. Breasts, different sizes, different growth developments. They have naked little girls. It's all sketch, illustration, but it's child pornography and it's adult pornography, and they're showing it to our children. It's called grooming. They are grooming our children inside the California public education system and also in the charter schools. One of the things that they have in here, they talk about masturbation. They talk about, in this book, teaching our girls how to masturbate. They're teaching them how to stretch out their hymen with their fingers and KY jelly. They're teaching them about the G-spot. They're teaching them how to douche, even though douching isn't healthy, but they give them a step-by-step how-to, and then they tell them how to do it. In the boys' book, they talk about how boys masturbate together. It goes on. I don't know if you can see those words up there, but they are too graphic for me to say. I mean, I'm saying a lot of graphic stuff, but they're telling our kids about slang words for the vulva, for the vagina, for the penis, for the scrotum. And I can imagine that you can think about what those slang words are if you can't see them up there, but I'm not going to say them. This is for a activity where they have a drawing of a male penis and a female vagina, spread eagle, gynecological view, and they tell our children how it's an activity. So they have the penis, the male one, and the teacher says in her best kindergarten voice how you color in the penis, stripes, blue and white stripes, and then go to the scrotum and color it in while they're having the kids yell out slang words as she writes them on the board, and then she moves on to the female body part and does the same thing. 5th grade. This book is called Sex, Puberty, and All That Stuff. It has our boys with measuring sticks so they can measure their penis. How to give themselves an erection and come. Mutual masturbation. Foreplay can be enjoyable and lead to orgasm. 5th graders. This is a page out of the framework, still in 4th through 6th grade. It says students can learn more about puberty using age-appropriate, creative, and interactive online resources such as PBS's, no longer safe, online videos on puberty and transitioning. They will help our children and show them videos on how to gender transition. Are you guys okay with that? I didn't think so, but they say you are. Teachers should normalize sexual feelings. This is still 4th through 6th grade. If the topic of masturbation arises, teachers may explain masturbation is not physically harmful. This is also an important time to discuss gender roles, and gender expression. Now, I'll let you know that since the last time I gave this presentation, This page has been updated, and it says, no longer does it say if the topic of masturbation arises. It says when it's introduced or arises. That means they're going to introduce it to our kids. Instructions on sexual health must affirm diverse sexual orientation and include examples, must also include gender, gender expression, gender identity, and the harmful outcomes that may occur from negative gender stereotypes. What is a negative gender stereotype? That means that I believe that a biological boy is a boy and a biological girl is a girl, and they're going to teach my child that I have a harmful negative stereotype. So if you believe that a biological boy is a boy and a biological girl is a girl, then they're going to teach your child the same thing because it has to affirm it only, and anything that goes against it and doesn't affirm is harmful. They're putting our kids against the parents. We're moving on to 7th grade, which is chapter 5. Students may be non-monogamous, and the term partners may also be used to be more inclusive. So they're going to teach our children how to be promiscuous. And it's all about sexual health, even though everybody knows that the more people you sleep with, the more risk you're at. But it's sexual health. Now I'm going to move on to the actual curriculum pages, and I'll have a few framework in here as well. But I'm going to show you what it looks like in the curriculum. So when they call you in and tell you they want to give you an information meeting on what they're going to teach on comprehensive sexual education and AB 329, they're not giving you this information. They're giving you an AB 329, which is the law overview. So this is a page from Teen Talk. It talks about the different birth control methods. And for birth control pill, the patch, the vaginal ring, they label it scrambled eggs. Do you know why they name it scrambled eggs? Because women have eggs, and they're going to scramble up those babies and kill them. Now, if that doesn't make you mad, and they want to be funny, I guess. This one is another page out of Teen Talk. It goes over the different sexual acts, which goes over oral sex, vaginal sex, anal sex. Putting your penis inside of someone's anus and having someone put their penis inside of your anus. That's sexually explicit detail. This is Positive Prevention Plus, your guys' curriculum, right? It may sound repetitive, but I'm showing you that no matter what curriculum you get, you're going to get the same content. One may have more text. The other one may have more visuals. So it says the different sexual contacts as well. So what they're not telling our kids is that there's no, when they're talking about anal sex, because they're introducing that, there are no condoms approved for anal sex, no FDA-approved condoms for anal sex because they're not strong enough for anal sex. It is the highest risk behavior there is. And the statistics of getting HIV is very high. So with 100% perfect use, and this is an adult, so we know kids aren't going to be using condoms 100% perfectly every single time. Adults can't even do that. It protects you 70% of the time. So let's just go with their perfect use. That means out of 100 kids, 30 of them will most likely get HIV. Is that a number that you want to gamble with your kids? No. This is a page out of Rights, Respect, Responsibility. At the top, it says a K through 12 curriculum. They're pretty bold. And this talks about one last barrier method, which is a dental dam, and that's a picture of a dental dam. That picture does not come with the curriculum, but the dental dam demonstrations do come with the curriculum, and they're telling them that the dental dam is used for oral sex on a vulva or an anus. An anus. We teach our children how to wash their hands after they use the restroom, and they're teaching them how to put their mouth on somebody's anus for sexual pleasure. And it's healthy because they're using a dental dam. And don't forget, dental dams are flavored because it makes sex safer. What does flavor have to do with safety? But do kids realize that? No, they just hear safer. This is Be Real, Be Ready, has a fun fact for us. Since the anus is not part of the reproductive system, if someone chose to have anal sex without a condom, pregnancy would not be possible. So anal sex, pregnancy prevention, right? They're not going into the harm that it causes, the permanent damage that will cause when you have long-term anal sex. This one has also been modified. So I'm going to tell you our efforts are working. We're not done fighting this battle, but we're starting to make them scared. So in this it's 9th through 12th grade, so it's chapter 6 of the framework. Students identify local resources for reproductive and sexual health and evaluate laws related to sexual involvement with minors by inviting the local American Civil Liberties Union. That's the ACLU. You know who the ACLU represents? They represent NAMBLA, North American Man Boy Love Association. That's a pedophile group. And they're saying that they're supposed to partner with our children to evaluate laws related to sexual involvement with minors, and they're also wanting to teach them how to give and receive consent. Now, since last week, they removed the ACLU. They added other health organizations, but they didn't remove the part where they're supposed to evaluate laws regarding sexual involvement with minors. Now, how are health organizations going to discuss these things with our kids when they're health organizations and not lawyers, right? They're removing a word. That's all they're doing. They're removing a word, and we got them to remove a word, which is good because it shows that they're scared. But we need to keep on fighting until this whole entire health curriculum, which is about a 1,000-page document, is completely gone, and AB 329 is completely repealed, and our kids are safe again. So these books that we talked about that they said that they removed the words of the books out of the framework, but they're still making them available online. So does that really say that they are removing the books, or are they just removing the words of the books, right? So I'm going to tell you about another book, Sex, the All You Need to Know Sexuality Guide to Get You Through Your Teens and 20s. So let's find out what they think our children need to know to get them through their teens and 20s. Deeper manual sex, fisting. They go into detail. What is it and how do you do it? And they tell them how to be able to insert their fist inside somebody's vagina or somebody's anus. And they give them step-by-step how to do that. I couldn't wrap my mind around it before. Now I know how, unfortunately. The law states that this is about sexual health and HIV prevention and STI prevention because it's a infection that you can easily get rid of like a cold, not an STD that lasts forever. Body fluid and blood play. I'm going to just read you a little portion of it. Some people enjoy any number of body fluids sexually. Ejaculate, vaginal fluid, menses, which is periods, urine, or blood. They may simply enjoy tasting, feeling, or smelling them during sexual activities, or they may engage in activities specific to enjoying those fluids, such as golden showers, being urinated on. It does go into briefly and vaguely about the dangers, but it's just very briefly and vaguely. And it says, what is it and how do you do it? Now, is that what they're telling you on that form? No, they're not telling you that they're doing this. And I don't think we're sending our children to go to school to talk about body fluid and blood play and how to be urinated on, right? No. So I'm going to show you a video to wrap this up. And this is a video that they show in Teen Talk to junior hires.
Being a teen can suck.
You are not wrong.
It's even harder if you're not a girly girl.
Or a jock.
Or pretty much anything that anyone else considers weird.
And puberty?
So imagine knowing you're a boy when everyone else tells you that you're a girl.
Or knowing you're neither.
Or a bit of both.
90% of trans students were harassed because of their sexual orientation or expression in school.
A third of them report hearing negative remarks from school staff.
But it doesn't have to be that way.
Often, all it takes to stop a bully is one person standing up.
Sometimes, all it takes to save a life is a little bit of kindness.
We're not just trying to make school a safe place for trans kids,
but for all kids.
Because we all have gender.
Or do we?
Gender fluid, genderqueer, gender nonconforming. And it's not just trans people that are targeted for it. Not to mention, some boys wear dresses.
And plenty of girls like action figures.
Kids don't have hang-up about gender the way adults do.
School should be a place to learn, grow, change, and even experiment. And here's a radical idea that could change everything.
Listen to young people.
They usually know exactly who they are and what they need.
Yeah, and isn't that kind of...
Amazing?
Yeah, amazing.
That's the type of content that they're going to, if they haven't already shown your children, they are, and much, much more. So I don't know how many people are here, but there's a lot of people here. And you're an army of parents and families and pastors, and we need all of you to rise up. There's different things that you can do just by sharing it with other people or getting actively involved, but we need to be actively involved in the community locally. We need to be going to the state, everything. So if you join us on Informed Parents of California on Facebook group, we're constantly taking actions because we are showing them that no matter what, we will not stop at anything to protect our kids. And the other side does not sleep. So summertime's coming around, and we're gonna, it's vacation time, go on vacation, relax, don't have to worry about school. The other side has lots of plans. They do a lot of stuff during summertime because they know parents are too busy. So if you even knew the stuff that I would see and I hear on a daily basis in this last year, and I'm talking about a daily basis, and the stories that we hear, we need you guys to get involved because our children desperately need it, because this is state-sanctioned sexual abuse. This is institutionalized grooming. They are making Planned Parenthood customers for life and activists and much, much more. And our children now and our generations to come are going to be severely affected if we don't stop it right now. And that's what we need to do. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so I told you she had the hardest job of the night. So Stephanie, thank you so much. Yeah, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we want to keep things moving along for the sake of time, and we were scheduled to have a break, but we're behind on that break. And so what I want to let you know is we're going to move along right now to some parent options and start talking to you. I mean, we told you a lot about what the problem is. Now we're going to tell you some things that you can do. So if you need to take a restroom break, feel free to just get up and go do that, but we're going to move along with the program tonight. And so right now I'm going to invite back up Pastor Mark Schneider to talk to you all about some parent options.
Working good. So if your blood isn't boiling, you better check your central nervous system. We apologize for having to show you this information, but were you shocked? You should be. You should be. I've got 5 minutes to talk about a conversation that could last an hour. So I'm going to go very quickly, see if I can find this. Could you bring the slide up? I think I pressed the wrong one. Okay, well, there we go, perfect, thank you very much. So I do want to tell you that long term, Stephanie did mention that our ultimate goal is to roll back AB 329 and the progeny that came before it. But until that happens, there are some very practical things you can do. Number one, you can pray. This is a spiritual battle. And I know most of you are probably from the community of faith here. So I encourage you, if there were ever a reason for us to get on our knees and storm the gates of heaven, don't our children qualify for that? So we should be praying. Number two, if you can go to the next slide, please. Get informed and get involved. And we don't have time to talk about all this, so I want to give you some websites that I highly encourage you to go through. Yes, take a picture of it. Protect Our Kids. A lot of the information that you've heard tonight are represented on our website. And in terms of options, if you go to the parent tab of that website, you're going to get most of the information you need to actually take some practical steps to hopefully safeguard your children against what's happening. Stop CSE is another great site to learn all about comprehensive sexuality education, what's happening not only in California, but across the nation. Informed Parents of California, you've already heard about that. I highly encourage you to sign up, not only on the website, but on their Facebook site. So please sign up for those websites. If we can go one more slide, advance one more slide, thank you. The next thing is talk to your kids. And this can be difficult, but you won't know what's going on in the classroom unless you ask. And you're going to have some difficult, sensitive conversations at a very early age. But you should very gently, very strategically, very adroitly try to find out from them what is being taught. Knowledge is power, and you need to be informed with knowledge before you can take action. Inspect the curriculum. You have a right to do that. You've already heard that there's a 14-day notification requirement before they actually start teaching your children this material. Take advantage of that. Make sure you get 14 days of advance notice. And even before then, you can make an appointment with your school district or your school and request, I actually want to see the curriculum that's part of CSE. Take pictures of it. Document what they're showing you. Document who is showing it to you. This will be evidence going forward if you need it. Opt out. Now the good news is, as you've heard, you can opt out of, well, maybe the most egregious part of this, which is when they're actually talking about male and female organs and having sexual activity. That portion you can opt your children out of. But you cannot opt your children out of all the different areas where SOGI and gender identity are being taught. And they're being taught just about everywhere. Social sciences, humanities, anthropology. I even heard about a statistics class that this topic was introduced in. That is the bad news. So how do we deal with that? Well, you vote. This is a very sad statistic. But the people who have put these laws into place, they have a name, they have a political affiliation. You should find out what that is and take note. Be very careful, pay attention to who's running, who's representing you in your districts. Barna says that only 1/2 of the faith community is registered to vote at any particular time. And only 1/2 of them actually vote in any particular election, which means only 25% of the faith community is actually participating in the political process. Barna also says that if 80% of those people actually voted, we could change every election in the country, let alone California. Also consider running for office. There's school boards, PTO, PTA, local assembly member, state senator. Some of you have the resources and time to do that. Please take advantage of that. On the website, again, if you go to Protect Our Kids, under Parents Options, there's more information on how to do that. And finally, and this is a tough one, given the material that's being presented to our kids and how embedded this curriculum now is in the state, it's going to be very difficult to try to remove all of it, which is going to mean sacrifice on the part of parents to deal with this. And the two most effective ways to deal with it is to pull your kids out of the public school. Either through private school or homeschool. Yes, you've probably looked at it already. It is expensive in California. I hear the average price for elementary school is $11,000 a year. For high school, it's about pushing $18,000 a year. That's what college used to cost 20 years ago. But that is the reality. But just as all politics is local, so is private education local. And I did a search in my own zip code. Within 5 miles, I found a multitude of elementary schools that were less than half of these prices. So please take the time to investigate private schooling.
Next thing we want to do is give you an educator's perspective. We're trying to have a real well-rounded conference for you so you have a lot to take home and a lot to discuss with your friends and your family. So we're going to talk right now with Brenda Lebsack. She's been a public school teacher since 1990. She's taught 4th grade, kindergarten, junior high, and high school English, special education, K through 12, and is now an adapted PE teacher in the Santa Ana Unified School District. She was elected as a board member for the Orange Unified School District in 2016. She and her husband, Mark Lebsack, have been married 33 years and have 2 adult children. Please help me welcome up Brenda Lebsack. Thank you.
There we go. All right. A lot of perspectives here. How many of you are public school teachers out there? Oh, awesome. How many of you work in public school district in any way, shape, or form? Okay, great. A lot of you out there. And how many of you have kids in the public school system? Okay, there you go. So these lights really are bright. It's not a one-size-fits-all, right? And just to let you know, my husband and I pastored in Las Vegas for 8 years. And what the one lady said, never say never, that's absolutely true. We went on our honeymoon to Las Vegas. I said, I never want to go back to this place again. I'll be fine never to go back there. And then we end up living there for 8 years. So I said, God, how can we raise our kids in Vegas? Why would you ask us to do this? Our kids both went to public school. Our daughter graduated from public school in Las Vegas. Very similar to what's going on right now, to be honest. And she is now an ABC news reporter. And she says to me today, at age 27, if I didn't go through the things I went through in high school, God prepared me to be the salt and the light in the media. So I'm just saying that pray. You pray and ask the Lord where your kids should be. And if it's supposed to be in the public school system, He will protect them. And He will do mighty things. I have so many stories to tell. So many. We never, ever have to go back or do anything or be motivated by fear. Amen? Because greater is He who is in us than he is who is in the world. So you make sure to hear from the Lord on what is the right plan for your kids, because there's lots of them. So I just want to give you a few perspectives. And I know there was a question real quick about the framework. The framework, yes, is a guideline. However, so we do have local control as far as communities and what we, bring into our schools. Thank God, we still do. But just to let you know, some of those things Stephanie said, just even the fact that it's in the framework is alarming. Who are these people in Sacramento that thinks these things are good for kids? That's what makes me so like, what in the world? These could not be parents running the game here, right? So I want to just let you know, I am a CTA member, California Teachers Association, and I really pray that teachers, please listen. How many of you know a public school teacher? Okay, the things I'm going to share with you today, I hope that you will share with public school teachers, okay? Because we need to be the people getting out the information because we're the insiders, all right? So I'm going to share you some things. And, oh, wait a second. I got to do this thing, don't I? It's that CTA one. Back it up. So this thing's not working? Okay, CTA. California Teachers Association. So our kids are grown, and when they left the home, I said, okay, Lord, I need a new thing, I like a new chapter in my life. And the Lord spoke to my heart and said, get involved in your union. I'm like, my union, why? I've got other things to do. But so I went online, I looked up, okay, here's the conferences. I'm gonna go to a conference. First conference, LGBT conference. I'm like, whoa, okay, I'll go. So, by the way, teachers, if you go to any of these conferences, your union will fully pay for it. That means you're gonna stay at the top line hotel, best food, and you'll get a sub, they'll pay for your sub, okay? They'll even pay for your plane flight. Everything's paid for, so utilize those union dues. So when I went to the LGBT conference, I learned so much. This was in 2015, but I do wanna tell you something that blew my mind. The very last day, I heard Eric Hines, who is the CTA president, speak. And he is a former minister. He's very charismatic. He's a homosexual. And he said, he referenced a court case, Friedrichs v. CTA. Some of you are aware of it. It allows teachers to not mandate to be part of the union. You can opt out of that. And when he referenced it, he called the plaintiffs spawns of Satan. When I heard this, my jaw dropped. Like I said, what? I couldn't believe my ears. And I went to my hotel room. I called the president of the Christian Teachers Union, and I said, please, David Schmus is his name. David, what is this court case? Tell me about this court case. Who's the plaintiff? And he explained to me Rebecca Friedrich. He said she's a member of the Christian Teachers Association. And he said, and the Christian Teachers Association is also a plaintiff. I'm like, wow, I was just called a spawn of Satan. So then I continued going to these conferences put on by CTA, Human Rights Campaign, lots of subjects, not very many academic subjects, but lots of social justice subjects to go to. And I went to another one, and he said it again. This time I had my phone on. This time I recorded it. So it will be used someday. So let's go to the next slide here. All right, so real quick, I know that Mark already went over these laws, but I want to just show you in context. California Teachers Association is an extremely powerful political organization. 350,000 members are giving their dues annually. That's $1,000 per member, okay? And they endorsed AB 329, which, remember, says there's no opt-out for any teachings having to do with gender identity or sexual orientation. There's no opt-out, no parent notification. Parents are notified for sex ed and HIV prevention, 14 days. They must be notified, but not for gender identity or sexual orientation teachings, okay? Such as the Who Are You book that Stephanie shared with you, that would go under this category. They do not have to be notified. Okay, because they say it's anti-bullying, non-discrimination. Okay, next one. California Safe Schools. I want you to see there is a website called California Safe Schools, and it is endorsed on the steering committee, the ACLU and also the CTA. And I want you to see what this website says about parental rights. There's a button here, and I encourage you to go to the website yourself and read it for yourself. It asks you a Q&A. Do parents have a constitutional right to prevent their children from receiving education in public schools on subjects they disapprove? The answer, almost never. Parents do not have veto power over the content of public school instruction. If parents choose to place their children in public schools, parental rights are generally outweighed by the state's interest in educating students. And if they elect to send their children to public schools, parents have very limited rights to prevent their children from receiving the entire range of instruction available in public schools. This is what the Teachers Association thinks about parental rights. Teachers here, do you agree with this? No, but the Teachers Association is speaking for us. Okay, let's go to the next one. Do parents have the right to notice about and to opt their children out of diversity education programs that include discussions of sexual orientation or other controversial topics? No. Instruction or materials that discuss gender, sexual orientation, or family life and do not discuss human reproductive organs and their functions is not subject to the parental notice and opt-out laws. And George already gave you that ed code. This is what our teachers union says about parents. Okay, next one. I'm bringing up the ACLU because parents, you are powerful, okay? And as a board member, when I started looking at this curriculum 2 years ago, and I'm seeing those videos that she showed, Trans 102, that was on there, I'm like, pansexuality, anal sex on, oral sex on anus, all that stuff. I'm like, what in the world? What? This is not the sex that I remember. And then I start telling, my board, I start telling my superintendent, this is controversial. She said, yeah, but the ACLU, if we don't do it, we're gonna get sued. This is what the districts are afraid of. This is the number one fear. ACLU is coming down with the hammer, and there's a fear of being sued, okay? And that's why they wanna implement. So, let me just tell you, I couldn't seem to stop it by myself, so I got together with some parents. I said, you guys, look at what's in the curriculum. I can't stop this. They're not believing me. When I tell them, they say, Brenda, you're just a religious fanatic. Come on, that's not what people think. Only 5 people opted out. I said, they didn't opt out because they have no clue what's in it. They don't know the law changed. They don't know the curriculum changed. I said, you guys have got to come to a board meeting. You've got to read directly out of this curriculum, because guess what? Don't assume your board members know what's in the curriculum. Most of them haven't read it, okay? You have to read it. These are your kids. You need to be the ones looking at what's in that curriculum. So when I showed it to them, I said, you come to this board meeting and you start quoting out of the curriculum. So they did, and they bombarded our board meeting. It was great. And then a week later, the board members were shocked themselves about what was in there, and they stopped it. They stopped it. Now, this made ACLU very angry. In fact, they even had the lawyer come to our meeting, and they sent us a letter only 3 days later after we stopped the curriculum. And this is what it said, and actually Mark did mention it. In their letter, they said, parents don't have the right to dictate what curriculum is used or what information is provided to students in public schools. The U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit has ruled that parents do not have any constitutional right to prevent a public school from providing its students with whatever information it wishes to provide, sexual or otherwise, when and as the school determines that it is appropriate to do so. Wow. Wow. Okay, ACLU, I guess we know how you think of us. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, another law that CTA endorsed, Senate Bill 677, data collection on sexual orientation and gender orientation required in the California Healthy Youth Kids Survey and teacher credential applications. So they are now asking our kids, in Santa Ana Unified, where I teach, there's 4 pages that they answer on this survey, very invasive questions about their gender. A kid just reading it, it's very leading. And it can just confuse you. Like, am I a boy? Am I a girl? What am I? Just by reading the questions. And please, districts do not have to use these state surveys. Orange Unified does not use the California Healthy Kids Survey. So ask, find out. This is an opt-out, by the way, but most parents don't opt out of it because they think, oh, it's just a health survey, no big deal. No, look at the survey. It's a big deal. Go to the next one. Senate Bill 1146. This is a big deal because this is the bill. It didn't get passed, but CTA endorsed Ricardo Lara. This bill alone could have ended our faith-based colleges in the state of California, okay? Because it basically said that faith-based colleges, their chapels and their classes that are teaching religious teachings, and these students are getting Cal grants, okay? They are discriminatory because the Bible is discrimination. Okay, so they were saying, the law said, remove all chapels from faith-based colleges, remove all biblical teachings from any subjects that are not vocational ministry, okay? Now, it did stop, and there's a long story behind that. But I just want to tell you that Ricardo Lara, who wrote this bill, CTA pushed him up the ladder in our last election, and he is now our insurance commissioner for the state of California. What does that say? California Teachers Association likes what he's doing. Okay, let's go to the next one. Senate Bill 239, CTA endorsed. Intentionally infecting someone with the HIV virus is no longer a felony. What? You may not believe it, so I'm gonna show you the screenshot. Go to the next one. Oh, but before I do, here's the quote that Rick Zabur, the executive director of Equality California, an LGBTQ advocacy group, said this: Senate Bill 239 is not only fair, but it's good public health. This is how they define public health, people, and will be good for all Californians. And this is the screenshot, right off of the CTA.org website, in case you don't believe me. Yeah, go ahead and take a picture of it. It's already archived, but if you're not sure, public school teachers, you just call up that phone number, legislative, and they'll tell you. His name is Tony. He's a good guy. He'll tell you the truth. Okay. AB 1266, the use of facilities based on perceived gender rather than biological gender. CTA endorsed that one, and Amiano, the one who wrote it. Senate Bill 179, official third gender in California, non-binary, has now come into effect in the state of California starting January 1st, 2019, written by Atkins. This is endorsed by CTA. Okay, now non-binary, you guys, I want you to know what non-binary is. Non-binary is not transgenderism. It is way beyond transgenderism. When you saw the genderbread guy, did you notice it had the female, the male, and then it had this other one? All right, that one was intersex. And there's a video in 7th grade teen talk about intersex, and I'm not gonna get into that. But okay, so this is in the CTA magazine, March 2017. This is when I first learned about gender spectrum, that gender is unlimited. Let's look. This is what it says. The gender categories, according to CTA, gender nonconforming, then we have ambigender. Gender nonconforming is transgender. Ambigender means you're both genders, and you need to go with the pronoun of they, them, and theirs. They, them, and theirs are pronouns that were in the framework, and it tells teachers, it guides teachers to use this as gender neutral and to be more inclusive. Agender means you're neither gender. You need to go by the pronoun of ze, here, here's, or hereself. Gender fluid means you fluctuate. This week I'm a girl, next week I'm a boy. You go back and forth. You need to fluctuate their genders. 5 is questioning, because now they have no clue. Okay. So this is actually a really big deal, and I'm gonna tell you why, teachers, and I'm gonna challenge you on something. If you are a member of the union, CTA union, I want you to ask your president, your chapter president, this question, because I've already asked a CTA president and all the chapter presidents that I could find. If a teacher refuses to use a plural pronoun, such as they, them, and theirs, for a singular person, will that teacher's job be in jeopardy? Could that teacher get fired? Let me tell you the answer. The answer is absolutely yes. Absolutely yes. Because the legal definition of gender identity is not transgender. It means you can be both, neither, or anything in between, or transgender. So unlimited gender spectrum, okay? And that is the definition of gender spectrum. And because we have a non-discrimination policy, that means that if a kid comes to you and says, I'm both genders, I want you to use they, them, and theirs. If you don't, you will be accused of discrimination and you could lose your job, okay? So I'm gonna challenge you to go ahead and do that. And teachers, another thing I challenge you to do, what? What? I'm challenging them to do that? Oh, to lose their jobs? No, not to lose your jobs. But here's the deal, this is what I believe. Teachers, we have to be the whistleblowers. And this is what I get frustrated about. I know we're busy, and I talk to a lot of teachers. I get very, very frustrated because they're almost like, Brenda, I'm not political. I don't want to know. Don't tell me. Don't tell me. It's not going to go away just because you're ignorant. Ignorance is not bliss. And guess what? If you are not saying something, you are enabling this to happen. Because people listen to us. And if we say, oh, no, that's not happening, because you don't know it's happening, but it is happening. So we have got to get in there. If you're gonna stay a union member, then start going to some things. And I have another stuff here, but I need to stop, and we're gonna do a panel, and maybe I can get to some of it. But this was one that I went to. Start going to the conferences. If you don't have time and you can't do it, then you know what? Get out of the union, at least make them feel it in their pocketbook, okay? This was another one I went to. Yes, they endorsed this one, Senate Bill 48. And I'm just saying there is, okay, Christian Educators Association. I'm part of the CTA because I wanna get their emails, I wanna get their magazines, I wanna go to their conferences, I wanna be an insider, and I wanna know what they're doing and what they're saying, okay? But I am also part of the Christian Educators Association for $200, the best $200 a year I can spend. Because obviously, I'm speaking out against my union, am I not? So I think I need a little extra coverage. So I've got $2 million liability insurance with Christian Educators for $200 a year. It's worth it. Plus, they give me a little support that I need. You know, the lawyer will even pray for me on the phone sometimes. It's awesome. What? Oh, they're here. David Schmoose is here. You guys talk to him and tell all your friends. And even though this is a Christian teachers union, let me just tell you something real quick. This does not just impact Christians, you guys. I'm going to be speaking in a mosque soon with the Muslims. Okay, the Muslims are very upset about what's going on. It affects Jehovah's Witnesses, Mormons, Orthodox Jews. You guys, this is even people who are agnostics or even not. I'm even working with some gay and lesbian groups as well, okay? Because there's a lot of them, they're like, what? We don't believe in this gender spectrum. That's ridiculous. And nor are we against parental rights, okay? So this is a very, very radical agenda, okay? And I'm just trying to bring in as many people as I can with diverse backgrounds, okay? So we can get unified and win this battle with the power of God. Amen.
And as the speakers are coming up, there is one question on here. I think actually I'll be the best one to answer it. So as you guys make your way to your seats, I'll tell you one of the questions was, what is being taught, what curriculum is being used in the Temecula Valley Unified School District? And the reason I'm the one probably most qualified out of everybody up here is because I went to the parents' night when they released it. And I'll tell you guys this, with as many people that are parents in the Temecula Valley Unified School District, there was about 10 or 15 parents that showed up. And that's not a good number. But I'll tell you, that can increase as you guys are getting this kind of information and you share it with your friends and your family and your neighbors. But what they are teaching is the Positive Prevention Plus. And what they said continually in our meeting, which was recorded, by the way, in the meeting, they said that they are in a year of transition. And so we asked, what does that mean? So what that means for those of you who are parents in the Temecula Valley, it means that currently they are not teaching Positive Prevention Plus in its entirety, but as of next year, they will be teaching it in its entirety. And that's one of the curriculums we talked about today, and that is on film. So thank you for letting me answer that right now. And I want to introduce our speakers. You guys already know Pastor George Rosca and Stephanie Yates, and then we've got Brenda Lebsack here, but we have a couple new ones with us. And so I want to make some introductions. First of all, we've got Netta Higuera. She's right there in the middle. Netta is an attorney for Tyler and Bursch, LLP in Marietta, and the nonprofit organization Advocates for Faith and Freedom. Since getting her license to practice law in 2014, she has loved the ability to advocate for her clients. She is passionate about the people she serves while at Tyler and Bursch. Netta has helped successfully vindicate a client's religious liberties in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. She was recently featured on the cover of Focus on the Family magazine for her victory in overturning the anti-life and unconstitutional Reproductive Fact Act in California. She is dedicated to protecting religious liberty and parental rights in the courts. Sitting just next to her, we have Dr. Clarissa Gosney, who is a licensed clinical psychologist. She is the owner and lead psychologist of Pinnacle Counseling and Testing Center in Marietta and San Diego. She specializes in psychological testing and in the treatment of children, adolescents, and adults with anxiety, trauma, OCD, and depression. And sitting on the end just next to her, we have Dr. Curtis W. Combs. He is a Christian former public high school educator who went to medical school at age 40. He sees patients with unplanned pregnancies, sexually transmitted diseases, and all imaginable family issues. Though he does not provide transitional medications and is not an expert in the area, he cares for numerous patients identifying themselves as LGBT. So our first question tonight, we're going to pose this one to you, Pastor George. And by the way this will work, we'll pose it to one person, but everybody on the panel has the ability to kind of give your input as you see fit. But Pastor George, what are safe, welcoming schools?
So Brenda actually showed a slide that was called California Safe Schools. As part of GELSON, the Gay, Lesbian, Straight Education Network, you will see something called safe schools, welcoming schools. You will typically see, together with the Human Rights Campaign, a nice yellow school bus with a rainbow on it. And you see these kind of stickers all around the school, on windows, on doors, inside, especially inside the classrooms. It's claimed to be an anti-bullying program that is meant to create inclusivity and safe spaces, especially for LGBTQ plus students. But it's just all their scheme, their way of getting into the schools to have the SOGI discussion with our children under the guise of anti-bullying and inclusivity. So if you see any of that in your schools, please go up to your principal, go to the superintendent. Not all schools have to do that. There is no mandate saying you shall be a safe and welcoming schools or anything like that that I know of. And so, Brenda, maybe you can talk a little bit more about it.
So Human Rights Campaign, we have a bill on the table now put out by our state superintendent, Tony Thurman, to mandate that all teachers be trained in the state of California to create inclusive, welcoming school environments. I want to show you from the Human Rights Campaign what they consider inclusive school environments. I've read their books and I've read their lesson plans. So this is a book for pre-K through 5th grade, They, She, He, Me, Free to Be. And it's a book about a non-binary gender pronouns. It says this: you can change pronouns from he to she or from she to he. You can use new ones like Z or create your own like tree. Some people use they. There are many more pronouns waiting to be discovered and used. The red, a crayon story. This is for pre-K through 1st grade. Everyone thinks the crayon is red because of its outside label, but really the crayon is blue because that's what's on the inside. The lesson plan tells students to share an inward identity not easily seen by others. For example, someone who looks at me may think I'm a girl, but I am non-binary and my pronouns are they and them. Non-binary is defined as people who do not feel like a girl or boy. They may feel like they're both or neither. This is for pre-K through 1st grade called Neither. It's a parable about unlimited genders. It says, once upon a time, there were 2 kinds, this and that. But now there are many kinds, this, that, sort of, just, somewhat, whatnot, rather, a little, either, very, neither, and both. And all are welcome. Just one more real quick, because this one was... they sent out free to any teacher that wanted it. I got a whole case for free, 32 books for my class for grades K through 5. This book calls Vice President Mike Pence by name boring and not fun. It calls legislative officials who supported Proposition 8 mean stink bugs and shows kids how to vote and kick these stink bugs out of office. This is going into political indoctrination.
Thank you. All right, Netta, this next one is for you. We'll start off with you. The question is this: if you opt your child out in writing and the school still includes your child, what is the recourse?
The recourse is a lawsuit because the California Healthy Youth Act, as much as we dislike it, it does give parents the right to opt out of all or part. And so if you opt out in writing, you have the right as a parent to have your kid put in a different classroom or receive alternative instruction. And so if those rights are violated, then legal action is necessary. And it could start with a letter to the school district to see how that happened. Was it a mistake? Is there a policy that they can make sure it doesn't happen again? Or was it willful and intentional? And do we need to file a lawsuit to enforce parental rights? And so definitely please call our office. We offer these services pro bono for free, so there's no charge to you if you have any questions about opt-out or your rights as a parent. But definitely exercise those rights. And if they're violated, that is what we're here for. That's what I'm passionate about. That's why I wake up every morning. And so we're here for you.
Thank you, Netta. So, Dr. Combs, we have a question for you. What dangers are there, other than the STDs, the STIs that we talked about tonight? What dangers are there in performing the act of anal sex?
Well,
you're on.
Well, besides the obvious long-term psychological effects of being involved in that, cancer is one of them. You have human papillomavirus, which is definitely transferred along with all the other sexually transmitted diseases that eventually can cause squamous cell carcinoma. You need your rectum to work for your whole life, and it's not nice when it leaks. And so there's a lot of problems there, but certainly I see young men come in all the time and they can't believe what's growing on their penis. We see young girls come in and they have genital warts covering their entire area there, and so it's very challenging to have to live with that the rest of your life, and they can't believe it. And so one just little word to you tonight, I'm going to challenge all of you, is that, yes, it's important, very important, that you fight this, okay? That we as parents, see that our elected officials and that our schools are doing what we would have them do. But how many of you have not had those conversations with your kids yet? And you really need to get with it, obviously, from what you're hearing tonight. We talk about protecting our kids, and I hope that's extending beyond our kids to all kids, because your kids come in contact with them. And for those of you of faith, they are your mission field. Even these LGBT individuals that I care for, God loves them just as much as your kids, and they need to be reached. And honestly, hearing some of this up here, it's almost hopeless unless there's a revival, and that takes you sharing your faith. And but if you don't know what to do, you can go old school. James Dobson put out Preparing for Adolescence. Obviously, you need to add a few more things. Masturbation was the biggest thing he talked about, but you want to look at look at some of the other things that we're talking about, and really start talking to your kids, because I can't even share with you, if your child is 12 and comes to me, I cannot even share with you, the insurance payer, what they are in there to talk about, whether it be birth control, STDs, or what have you. It's against the law if they don't want to be told. So it's time that you become the focus, you become the place they go for answers, and they will bless you for that the rest of their life, because you are the source of their information, not the world around them.
Absolutely, absolutely. Stephanie. So Stephanie, here's a question for you. What books should we watch out for in our local library?
Well, I'll tell you, when I search my son's school library, I do keywords: sex, LGBTQ, transgender, inclusive, different things like that. I just use keywords. I have found books in the library. So one of the books actually in a public library was It's Perfectly Normal. And it's for little kids, and it's under the category of sex instructions for children in a public library. Is there not something wrong with that? Sex instructions for children? And at my local library, it was on the second to bottom shelf in the kids section. And it has all the graphic sexual acts and bending over and looking at the genitals and everything like that. So there's actually a lot of graphic books in the school too, regular, just sex books, lots of things like that. So you really want to just start searching those things. And they're not safe. I mean, my son used to read all the time. Now he's too busy with sports and homework, but he just devoured books at his library at school, and I can imagine now what he may have come across. Yes.
If you go to welcomingschools.org, it has all of these, many. This was only just a little sample.
Okay. Dr. Gosney, a question for you. Hearing all of these things that are taught from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade, what type of psychological ramifications are there for the children?
This is a really big question, and I think a huge concern for me, both as a professional and as a mother. Some of the concerns that are out there are whether our children will know the difference between keeping our privates private and making our privates public. One of the concerns that I have is from one of the books that was mentioned. It's not the stork. I know we've heard a number of quotes out there, but I'm going to just mention this one. Again, this is for first grade curriculum. When grown-ups want to make a baby, most often a woman and a man have a special kind of loving called making love, having sex, or sex. This kind of loving happens when the woman and the man get so close to each other that the man's penis goes inside the woman's vagina. And then they continue to talk about how the sperm exits the tip of the male's penis, goes into the, you guys know the story if you've got kids. Hopefully, even if you don't, you know the story. So I don't need to continue. My concerns are many, one of which is for children who are being sexually abused. This normalizes this behavior. This helps these children, and the picture is innocent but sickening when you're reading it. Actually not innocent at all, I can't even say that. It's got a cartoon of a man and a woman under the sheets together with hearts all around and big grim smiles on their faces. My concern is for children who are being sexually abused who are gonna feel loved based on this behavior from an adult. Another concern that was brought up to me is how men can appropriately love their children, their daughters, their sons, without their children questioning, is my dad holding me so tight that his penis is going to enter my vagina? That is a major concern. Men already, we deal with this all the time, is that a lot of men have trouble showing appropriate love to their children because they don't want it to be interpreted as something else. And this brings that about. It brings on confusion for the children. It brings on concerns for the parent on how we can appropriately love our children. And that's so important in a child's development, to be appropriately loved and cared for and touched appropriately by both of our parents there. Personally, for my children, we teach them two huge rules in dealing with adults, is that a safe adult will never ask a child for help. A safe adult will ask another adult for help. The second thing we teach them is that a safe adult will never ask a child to keep a secret. And yet, what is our school system asking our children? To keep a lot of things secret. We're not able to be in the classrooms to say what we want our children to learn or what we don't want them to hear. We're not getting that opt-out questionnaire. There's a lot of things that are being asked of our children, that are being taught to our children, that they are expected to keep private, including there's a curriculum, one of the books used in the curriculum for 5th grade talks about how, we're not saying that your parent or your religion is wrong, but a lot of children wind up not following what their parents or their religion says. So maybe it was not your choice after all. And so explicitly going in and teaching our children to defy their religion, defy what their parents say. And that's causing a lot of confusion for kids. My last point being that for a child who, I laugh at the non-conforming to genders. I was a tomboy growing up. My oldest child is a tomboy. I even hate that word. I don't know why I'm using it. I loved playing with salamanders. I loved playing in the dirt. I had a creepy crawler machine instead of an easy bake oven. And had someone come to me in my classroom, the teacher who I looked up to very, very much, and said, you know, you don't seem to follow typical gender norms. You're not the girl with the bow in your hair. You're not wearing a dress, and your favorite color is green instead of pink. You might really be a boy, and that is up to you to choose. That causes great confusion in these kids. And Erickson's developmental stages, we've all learned them as educators, mental health professionals, perhaps some of you who are not in those categories. There is a stage called identity versus role confusion, and that is from ages 12 to 18, where really it states that 12 to 18, they don't know what their identity is. They're grasping for straws. Every middle school and high school person is trying to figure out really who they are. Erickson claims that adolescents may feel uncomfortable about their body for a while until they can adapt and grow into the changes. Success in this stage will lead to the virtue of fidelity. Failure to establish a sense of identity within our society can lead to role confusion, which involves the individual not being sure about themselves or their place in society, which leads to an identity crisis where an adolescent may begin to experiment with different lifestyles if that stage of their development is not accurately met. So let's love on our kids. Let's teach our kids the right way. Let's teach our kids that safe adults don't ask our children to keep secrets. Safe adults don't ask a child for help. Be that person for your child, because even if your child's not in the public school system, your child is being taught by someone somewhere, hearing rumors, hearing from different children, these things that are being taught. And so our children need to be able to come to us. We need to be able to protect them and keep them safe so that they can have their identity, they can function, and they can contribute and give back.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Can I chime in for
yes,
just a second?
please.
She's talking about 12 to 14-year-olds, but in the curriculum, we're starting in talking about gender issues, in kindergarten. And I think almost as bad is the section I was reading for the parents. A lot of parents are not rooted and grounded. They kind of go where things go. And you don't want to feel out of it. You don't want to feel like you're behind the times when everybody's talking about this gender or that gender, and I should really expose my kids to that. And they've heard about it. And so now you're making that more of the norm for the parents. And they're now even more open to this. And as long as we keep getting fed stuff over and over and over, sooner or later it becomes true. You believe that it's a woman's right to do with her body what she wants to do with her body. Well, there's no science to that. It's not her body. There's no fingerprint, no DNA of that child inside of her. It's not her at all. But if you hear it enough, you begin to accept it if you don't think about it. It's all a miracle when the baby comes out. As long as that baby hasn't quite exited, even if it's just his head and we sever its spinal cord, it's not real. It's just magic. It's now becoming life. Well, now you're dealing with these children that are being told to think about who they are, male or female, and now you're allowing them, the parents, to think, parents will fret over every little thing for their kid. And so as they're watching their child sort of struggle and think, I'd get through their identity, now they're able to offer them hormones to change. And who makes that decision? Actually, the child. So you have 13-year-olds determining that they're going to become a male. Now, the people that I've worked with, they were adults, and they decided as adults to make this decision, all right? And whether I agree with it or not, they were adults. But what we're seeing now is that this is heading downhill, and you're going to cut off puberty with hormones, stop them from having puberty at the time that would help them, right? Their hormones would help them figure out who they are, because you're going to get a surge of testosterone and you're going to get very interested in girls most of the time. And 90% of the time, this is figured out early on. But you're going to cut that off, and you're going to make it look like it's the cool thing to do if you're a parent. outside of this kind of a rooted organization. So it's very, very dangerous what's going on right now, as far as I can see, for kids and their psyche. And some of this stuff is very, very permanent. We don't even know about their brain development because of these drugs that they would be offered and cutting short and not allowing them to go through puberty.
Right, absolutely. The next question, thank you, by the way. The next question, I'm going to throw this to you, Stephanie. The question, and then I'm going to throw this one to you, but then also follow this up, whoever wants to on the panel, to talk about briefly SB 673. But the question is, from whom do we demand to see the curriculum?
You want to call your district office, not your principal or school, because at the district office, they make the decisions there. It's the curriculum specialist. They may have different words for it. So what you want to do is you want to call the district office, tell them you want to talk to the person in charge of the curriculum that makes curriculum decisions. They may tell you that you need to call your school district or your school and tell them, no, you make those decisions there. You have to go through a whole curriculum process of going through different curriculums, going through the school board. There's a whole process. So they do that there. So they know exactly what curriculum they're using. It doesn't depend on each individual school district or each individual teacher like they want to tell you. And what you want to tell them, and if you have a pen and a paper right now, you want to write this down. You want to ask them, what are you using right now to teach comprehensive sexual education, AB 329, that covers sexual orientation, gender identity, STI, STD, or ST, they say STI, prevention, HIV prevention, pregnancy prevention. You even want to ask them, what are you doing to teach anti-bullying and suicide, because they're doing that too. And then you want to tell them, I want the teacher's manual, what you're teaching. I want any videos, any supplements, anything at all that you're using in any class at all, inside or outside of sex ed. They will teach sex ed in health, science, PE. It just depends on your school district or your school. That would change per school too. So those are the things you want to ask them. If they try to give you the runaround, you have the right to ask for the curriculum, and they have to show it to you. And it doesn't have to be in that small little period that they tell you. And now if they give you a little tiny packet like this much, these curriculums are almost 300 pages, so it's a big binder. So don't let them fool you. I got really excited when, just like that, I called and they said, yeah, sure, come on in. And 2 days later, I went in and I walked out with a little packet. And then I went through it and I realized, oh, this is a student workbook and the PowerPoint presentation. So I had to go back and ask, and they didn't want to give it to me. So they give you a runaround. They'll tell you all kinds of things. On average, I spent a minimum of 1 hour trying to get the curriculum name because they don't want to give it up.
Yeah, go ahead.
Our office did a public records request to the Marietta School District, and we weren't given any information. My assistant, Desiree, called in to ask the same question, and it's just a lack of transparency. Not to say that they're teaching some of this material or whatnot, but why not have the instruction available? Why not put it on their website? Why not show parents exactly what it is? Why is it so difficult for us as community members, as taxpayers, as parents, to examine this curriculum, to be involved in the process? There's several laws that say parents have the right, as mutually supportive partners in education, to have input in the curriculum process. One of those is Education Code 60002. Which grants parents the rights to look at the curriculum, and you can make copies of it, you can take pictures, but yet it's so difficult, even in our communities, in our local communities.
In the law, it says that they have to give it to you, and even you have the rights to have copies, even if they charge you about 10 cents. So I've heard some districts say, oh, well, I'll give you could choose 20 pages or something like that. Or they want to charge you like $200. Take in a realm of paper and say, here you go, here's paper, make me a copy of the curriculum.
And the ed code that Netta just quoted, it actually says not just parents, but it says community members. Remember, you're the taxpayers. Remember that you're the one paying for public education. So you have the right, you don't have to be a parent. You have the right to go look at that curriculum. You're paying for it. You elected those board members.
So real quick, just want to talk about SB 673. Pastor Tim mentioned that one. So we've been working with Informed Parents of California and Senator Mike Morrell on passing a bill that's right now in a two-year legislation. So it's going to come back up in January of 2020. And this bill's important because we're trying to incrementally fight back, okay? Two things. Number one is we are trying to change AB 329 to state that an opt-in will be required for K through 6. We won't get K through 12th grade opt-in, but at least for our most vulnerable children, we can make this an opt-in. So number one, it takes the K through 6th grade and it turns comprehensive sexuality education into an opt-in. The second thing that it does is it mandates that all of this material, K through 12, be available online on the website. Everything, the instructional material for the students, the teachers' handbooks, any videos. We don't need to go and research all of this stuff. It should be there at the tip of our fingers.
How many of you are PTA involved in the PTA? Okay, just so you know, the bill that he just mentioned increases parental rights. PTA opposed that bill.
All right, we have time for one final question. I'm going to give this to you, Netta. Why is it that nobody has sued the CDE for exposing the children to child pornography?
Well, what you saw today in the curriculum, that is pornographic. It's obscene. If I were to just go out there and find a child and show it to them, I could be arrested, and I very well should be. However, the criminal code section that penalizes child pornography has an exception, and it states that if material is used for medical, scientific, or educational purposes, or in an educational setting, then there is an exemption. So in those classrooms, these teachers and the legislators are exempt from this material that really is child pornography. And it's a travesty that they can be exempt. You know, those are the adults that we trust our kids with, and yet if you even just mail that to a random house and a child looks at it, you can be criminalized. So I think that it should be, you know, that the California Department of Education and any teacher who decides to show that to kids should be penalized, but there is an exception, and there's a lot of immunity from liability when it comes to teachers.
All right, thank you so much. You guys, please give them a round of applause for being here. Thank you so much. All right, to close the night out, I just want to welcome up Pastor Jim Doman of Church United, and he has a couple of closing points to share with you. Pastor Jim, thank you so much. Thanks.
Well, thank you for being here tonight. I'm going to close out in prayer on my knees because this is really serious stuff. And if you don't make it a habit of getting on your knees, this is stuff we really need to cry out to the Lord. Hey, you guys can put the picture, thank you, of my family up there. I'm a former homosexual. I didn't even have any of this stuff presented to me as a child. Thank you. This is God's restoration on earth. This is the first time I've heard this presentation, and I'm totally blown away. And what amazes me is that what they're teaching you is it's so contrary to what God's design is for man, woman, and sexuality. They are teaching homosexual sex upon heterosexual sex. It's abhorrent. It is evil. It is fornication. It is sinful. I was one. That's what I were, but I was washed by the blood of Jesus. Amen? And I'm not here to say I'm perfect or I've got it all together, but I do know we have a Savior and his name is Jesus. And this content was very explicit. And I don't know how it affects your heart or your mind, but I'm going to pray God's protection over you, that you steward this wisely, and that you would be protected if it's brought up things from your past, if you've been sexually abused, if things that you have done or you've thought about. I just want to pray protection over you and your children. Because he that is in us is greater than he that is in the world. As Revelation says, we triumphed by the word of their testimony and the power of the blood, or the power of the blood and the word of their testimony. So you join me in praying tonight. God, you are greater than evil. You are greater than sexual perversion. You are the creator of man. You're the creator of woman and sexual intimacy. God, California is in desperate need of your son, Jesus. It is the wickedest state in the union, and this stuff is beyond wicked. And I just ask that your people would rise up, that we would stand for justice, that we would stand up for these little children, kindergarten all the way through 8th grade. This is my family up here from our Christmas photo this past year. I can't even envision my children being exposed to such perversion. God, would you awaken men to be men and quit being wusses and silent like we were in the garden? Lord, thank you for the women who were bold enough to talk about topics that need to be discussed. But God, tonight, these topics is just the opposite of what you're designed for healthy, beautiful sexuality is. Forgive me for my evil thoughts and fallen thoughts. Thank you that you restore us into righteousness and right behavior. So Lord, I pray for every man, woman in this room, that the blood of Jesus would continue to cleanse their hearts and their minds, and you would protect them from the evil that we heard tonight, what is being indoctrinated into children in all of our public schools by law. God, let a board member stand up and say, this is wrong, we're not going to tolerate it. Take us to court until we change the laws of the state that will protect the little minds. Lord, Romans says you will destroy us. You will give us into destruction. Lord, we beg and we ask for your mercy that does not happen, that we would be a generation that would intercede for these little ones and they would not grow up with such perversion. So I just ask that the blood of Jesus wash our eyes, our hearts, and our minds. And Lord, we leave this at the cross and we walk in holiness and purity and restoration, even if we've messed up in our past. Thank you for being a God of love. Thank you for being a God who loves any sinner who doesn't know you. Move in us. Let us hear your voice. Let us be Jesus to a lost and dying world and be that grace and that mercy, always seasoned with truth. In the all-powerful name of Jesus, and all God's people said, amen and amen. Thank you.